Your phone is going to do something, not ring, not produce the ordinary ambient quality of a notification that gets processed and dismissed in the continuous flow of digital life. Something different, something that has the specific arresting quality of a message that stops whatever you are doing. That produces the particular involuntary response of someone who has just read something and whose brain is requiring a moment before the ordinary processing can resume. The reading, the rereading, the specific, slightly suspended quality of sitting with a screen and understanding that what just arrived is not ordinary, is not the normal texture of a Tuesday, is not something that fits cleanly into the categories that have been available for understanding the situation you are in. Something that was not expected is arriving in text form, and it is going to shock you. I want to begin with the shock piece because the title promises it, and shock deserves its honest examination rather than being used as dramatic inflation without content. This is not the shock of something bad. I want to establish that first and clearly because shock tends to carry a negative connotation, the specific bracing quality of news that requires protection before it can be absorbed. The way people sometimes freeze or go cold when something devastating arrives, that is not the quality I am reading. This is the other shock. The specific, slightly breathtaking, did I just read that correctly shock of something that exceeds expectation in the upward direction that is not bad news, wearing the appearance of good. That is genuinely, straightforwardly, this is actually happening good, in a form and from a direction and at a moment that none of your prior preparation for this situation had prepared you for. The unprepared for quality is the shock, not the content. The content is extraordinary. Let me describe who this is coming from, because the shock is partly about the content and partly about the source. This is someone you have been uncertain about. Not uncertain about in the sense of not knowing how you feel about them. Uncertain about in the specific, frustrating, I cannot read this situation quality of someone who has been producing mixed or incomplete or difficult to interpret signals. Who has given you enough to maintain engagement, but not enough to know with confidence where the engagement is heading? Who has occupied a specific, ambiguous territory in your understanding of your situation that has been requiring more energy to navigate than it has been comfortable to acknowledge? That ambiguity is about to end, not gradually, not in the specific, slow clearing quality of something that becomes less ambiguous over time as more information accumulates. In the specific one message, now you know quality of a communication that makes the ambiguous unambiguous. That crosses enough of the outstanding open questions with enough clarity that the territory of not quite knowing collapses into simply knowing. The text is the crossing. That ambiguity is about to end, not gradually, not in the specific, slow clearing quality of something that becomes less ambiguous over time as more information accumulates. In the specific one message, now you know quality of a communication that makes the ambiguous unambiguous. That crosses enough of the outstanding open questions with enough clarity that the territory of not quite knowing collapses into simply knowing. The text is the crossing. I want to describe what the territory of ambiguity has actually been costing you, because acknowledging it honestly is part of what makes the arrival of the text significant rather than simply interesting. It has been costing you energy, the specific, continuous, not dramatic but real energy cost of maintaining a position of engagement with something that is not yet defined, of caring about something you cannot fully plan around because you do not have enough information to plan, of the specific, ongoing, requires daily renewal quality of someone who is interested and uncertain simultaneously, who has to hold the interest and the uncertainty together without either canceling the other. That is tiring, not in a way that produces visible distress, in the quiet, accumulating, slightly draining quality of a sustained and unresolved position. The text resolves it in one direction or another, but it resolves it. And the resolution, even before you know which direction it resolves in, is a relief, simply from the ending of the ambiguity, from the specific, valuable, rare quality of finally knowing rather than continuing not to know. I want to describe what the text actually contains, because the shock requires content and the content deserves its specific description. The text contains a statement that is not casual, not a casual check-in that could be read as friendly interest, not the ambiguous form of communication that has characterized some of what has come before, something direct, something that names something that the person sending it understood in the sending was going to land differently from everything that preceded it, and who sent it anyway, who made the specific this cannot be taken back choice of putting something true and significant into the space between you in the form that is most irreversible. The written word, which persists, which can be reread, which cannot be claimed as misheard or misremembered or distorted by the passage through imperfect human memory. They put it in writing, and what they put in writing is what they have been carrying in one form or another for a period of time, what has been present in the subtext of some of what has passed between you. What has been the thing underneath the thing that never quite made it to the surface in the unambiguous form? It is now on the surface, unambiguous, in writing. I want to describe one more specific quality of what the text contains, not just that it is direct and names something, the specific emotional quality of what it names. It contains vulnerability. The specific, genuine, cannot be mistaken for performance quality of someone who is offering something that costs them something to offer, who is not making a casual statement, but extending something from the interior in a form that makes the interior visible. Who is putting themselves in a position of exposure that the prior, more careful, more managed quality of the connection did not require. The vulnerability is visible in the text, not in a dramatic way, in the specific, readable quality of language that is reaching for something rather than performing something, that has slightly less polish than managed communication has. That has a quality of honesty that comes at the cost of some of the elegance that composure produces, where the perfect phrasing was sacrificed for the true one. The true one is what arrived, and the vulnerability in it is the most honest thing they have offered you, possibly ever. In whatever the history of communication between you contains, this text has a quality that the prior communications did not reach. The quality of the actual, I want to speak to why now, because the timing of the text is not arbitrary, and the why of the timing carries its own information. Something shifted in them, in whatever the specific internal processes that had been holding the text back from being sent. The accumulation of the feeling reaching a density that the everyday containers could not hold indefinitely. the specific moment of something being sufficient, of enough experience and enough time and enough of the particular individual quality of them arriving at the conclusion that continuing to hold this in its private form was costing more than sending it would cost. The math changed. The cost of sending it, with all its attendant vulnerability and uncertainty in the specific, cannot control the response quality of putting something into another person's hands, became smaller than the cost of continuing to not send it. And when that math changes, the action follows. Not immediately always, but inevitably, because there is no sustainable position on the other side of that math change. Once the not sending has become the more costly option, the sending is simply what happens when the person has gathered enough of whatever resource the sending requires. They gathered enough. The text was composed, and it is coming. Let me describe what the moment of receiving it is going to feel like, because I want to prepare you for it so that you are present for it rather than in the managing the response position when the shock arrives. You will read it once quickly. The first reading will be the processing reading. The rapid, still integrating, is this what I think it is quality of someone who has just encountered something they were not prepared for and whose brain is still catching up to what the words actually mean. The first reading produces awareness before it produces understanding, and then you will read it again, slowly, in the specific, deliberate, now I am going to actually be in this quality of someone who has identified that what arrived deserves the full quality of their attention rather than the rapid processing of the first reading. Who is setting aside whatever they were doing before the notification arrived and giving the text the specific, present, nothing else, right now quality of reception that it warrants. In the second reading, the shock, the specific landing fully quality of what the words actually are and what they actually mean and what the fact of their having been sent actually says about the person who sent them and about the situation you have been in and about what is now available that was not available before the text arrived. Tell me in the comments if you are already sensing this. If the quality of the current period of your life, the specific texture of recent days, has had a charged quality that suggests something is building toward an arrival, whether you have noticed anything in how this person has been engaging with you that suggests the math I described has been in the process of changing, tell me what you are feeling going into this. I want to speak to what the text changes, because the shock is the moment and what comes after the shock is the rest of the story. The text changes the available territory. Before the text, the territory of what was possible between you was defined by what had been officially acknowledged between you, by the specific, limited, this is what has been said quality of a situation that had not yet been explicitly named in its fullness. Whatever has been happening between you has been happening in the space between the official and the actual, between what was acknowledged and what was felt. The text moves something into the official, names something that had been in the space between acknowledged and actual. And the naming of it, the specific written, now it exists in the external world quality of what was previously only interior, changes what is available. What becomes available is engagement. The specific, direct, no longer navigating around the unnamed quality of two people who have the same information, who know that both of them know, who are no longer performing not knowing or not naming, or the specific, sometimes exhausting quality of managing an interaction that contains something important that is not being directly addressed. The text ends the performance. What follows it is real. What follows it is real. I want to describe what real looks like in the specific context of what comes after a text of this quality, because real is a large word and the practical quality of what it means here is worth naming. Real means the conversation can happen, the actual conversation, not the conversation that navigates around the thing, not the exchange that contains the thing in subtext while the surface is about something else, not the specific, slightly exhausting quality of two people communicating in a way that has a significant unreferenced presence beneath it. The text has moved the thing from subtext to text. And once something is in text, conversation about it becomes possible in a way it was not before. Both people have access to the same information. Both people know that. Both people have access. The specific, slightly tortured quality of managing the unacknowledged becomes simply unnecessary. The conversation can be direct about what is actually between you at full resolution without the mediating layer of having to work around something that has not been named. That directness is what becomes available. And directness in the context of something this significant is one of the most valuable things that can become available between two people. The text produces it. I want to speak to something about your response, not what you should say, what you actually feel, because the shock, when it arrives, has a tendency to produce the specific, slightly frantic quality of someone who immediately begins composing a response before they have actually finished being in the receipt of what arrived. Who moves from the receiving to the responding before the receiving has been completed? Do not do that. Not because a response is not warranted, because the quality of your response when it comes will be better if it comes from someone who has actually fully received what arrived rather than from someone who is still in the middle of receiving it. Receive first. Be in the shock. Let it be as large as it actually is. Let whatever the genuine interior response is to what you just read have the specific time and space it needs to fully arrive before the managing of the response to it begins. You are allowed to be surprised. You are allowed to feel the full size of whatever the text produces in you, whatever that is. Whatever you actually feel when you read it, unmanaged, unfiltered, in the first genuinely present moments of receipt, that is the information. That is what will tell you what your response should be. Not the calculated version. The actual version. I want to speak to what this text means beyond its immediate content, because texts of this quality are not only what they say, they are what they represent. They represent someone having done something difficult. The specific, quietly courageous quality of putting something true and significant into writing and sending it to a person whose response cannot be controlled or predicted with certainty, of extending something important into a space where it is no longer entirely yours, where it belongs partially to the person who receives it, where what they do with it shapes what it becomes. The text is an act of trust. The trust is directed at you specifically, and trust of this quality, extended through an act that has this much exposure in it, deserves to be received with the specific quality of care that genuine trust deserves, not a performance of the right response. The actual, genuine, from your real interior quality of someone who receives something important that was sent with courage and who responds to it with the full, honest, nothing hidden equivalent. The equivalent is available to you. It is whatever you actually feel. The equivalent is available to you. It is whatever you actually feel. I want to add something to this because I think it is the most useful thing I can offer for the moment after the shock. Your actual feeling is the right response, not a version of your feeling that has been processed through what you think the appropriate response is, not the response that is designed to communicate a particular thing about your position or your interest level or how affected you are. The unprocessed version, the one that is simply there before any of the usual organization of emotional experience into communicable form has happened. That version is what the text deserves. Because the text came from their unprocessed version, from the place of vulnerability that I described, from the text having been sent before, the maximum comfort with the sending was achieved, from someone who chose to be exposed rather than to continue being safe. That exposure deserves an equivalent, not strategically crafted, simply honest, whatever your honest is. Let me close with the image of the moment. Your phone in your hand or on a surface near you, in the ordinary, unremarkable quality of a device that has been part of the background texture of your day, not yet containing what is about to arrive, simply there, part of the ordinary. And then the notification, the specific, particular sound or vibration or visual appearance of something having arrived that in ordinary circumstances produces a glance and a dismissal or a brief engagement and a return to whatever was happening before. Not this time. This time the glance produces the second look, and the second look produces the reading, and the reading produces the shock. The specific full stop, wait what quality of someone who has just encountered something that requires a moment before ordinary functioning can resume. Your phone is going to do that. Something is coming from someone who has gathered enough of whatever the sending requires, who has decided that the not saying is no longer the right position, and who is about to put something true in writing for you to read and reread and sit with, in the specific, slightly breathtaking quality of something that arrived when it was not expected, in the form it arrived in, from the person who sent it.